these days, when you have a vision or a passion for something that you want to do, life can be a little overwhelming. It can be challenging when there are people or circumstances that get in your way that tell you you can't do this because, or you shouldn't do this, and to try to direct you in a different way. And I think it can be so valuable for us to learn from people who have followed their dreams, who have really created a passion and a life for themselves that has allowed them to follow their dreams and to do the things they want to do. And today I am deeply delighted to be talking to my dear friend and incredible role model and inspiration, Captain Lynn Rippelmeyer. I will put her bio down below, but just briefly, Lynn was the first woman to captain a 747 across the Atlantic Ocean. And she came to that career at a time when women were told that they were not smart enough or strong enough to be pilots. And so we are just going to talk with her and learn how you too can unlock your dreams. Lynn, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
You know, I love your story, and I know you have two books that you've written, the first one being about the process of becoming a pilot, and then the second one about your aviation career. And really, you started as a farm girl who just loved planes and became a flight attendant. But what inspired you to seek that career in aviation? And then from there to become a pilot? I mean, that was a rarity back then.
I might correct you a little bit. I was a
Okay.
farm girl who was enamored with the view, the feeling of flight more than
Okay.
planes, I think. Yes,
Okay.
I guess you needed a plane to do that, but in my mind, if my horse could get wings, then I could, or if I could be a bird, I would imagine what it looked like, what it must feel like to fly. And and then I guess, yeah, once you get that in your head and you've got that image, that dream, anything that offers you to get close to that is what you grab onto.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I was told there were no female pilots, and when there isn't one, you assume there's some good reason for that.
Mm.
So I thought if there weren't any female pilots, there couldn't be or shouldn't be. I didn't know that it was just because, well, basically, society had amnesia. I mean, there were women pilots in World War II. There were the WASP, the women flying the heavy airplanes over across the ocean for the war. And then I don't know, a generation later, nobody was talking about it. So as I was growing up, I mean, that had just happened the decade before that, but nobody was talking about it, so I didn't know. And I was told I could be a teacher or a nurse, so I initially became a teacher, but then interviewed and became a flight attendant, and thought that was as close to being a pilot as I could get. But then taking the meals to the pilots and talking to them, I couldn't see any reason why, if they could do it, women couldn't, and including me. But and then so when I had the opportunity to start taking flying lessons in a little airplane, jumped on it, had a wonderful time, just loved it. And that eventually did lead into me getting to sit in those same seats that those guys that were sitting in that I was giving the meals to.
And for you, you actually took a really challenging path because you went the private route to get your pilot's license and learn how to do all that. Because at the time, I have to assume the military route was closed to you.
It was, and it was almost the only route. I'd say, I don't know, well, I do know 95 to 99% of the pilots, depending on which airline you talk to, came out of the military. That's where all the training was done, because you needed jet airplane experience, and
Mm.
that was the only place you could get it. So yes, it was very unusual to come through what they call general aviation, non-military training. Much more so than now. Now that is, I think, as common as the military, if not more so. But
Mhm.
yeah, then I did try to get into the military, and no, they didn't. They let women in the military, but for flight training, not to be a pilot. So it wasn't an option.
And I know in your book, you talk about how you had at least one very important role model that got you started. Who were some of the biggest role models that basically just encouraged you? Because as I said at the beginning, I think for so many of us, we have a dream or we have an aspiration, and just about everybody around you goes, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to go against that, and then you need somebody who's your champion. So who were some of your biggest role models, and how did they help support you?
Um, there were some wonderful men and women. The female pilots that came before me were wonderful role models. Emily Warner and Bonnie Taberzi. Emily had been hired by Frontier and Bonnie by American, and I contacted them and said, they're telling me that you were hired at these airlines. Did they actually hire you? Because the pilots I'm flying with at TWO are telling me it's just a publicity stunt, that they're just doing it for PR and you're never really going to get to fly an airplane. And they said, no, that we are on the seniority list and we are getting paychecks as pilots. You do need the same requirements as a man, but go get those requirements and fill out the applications and you can do this too. And yeah, just the difference of knowing that somebody like you is doing what you want to do makes the impossible possible, basically, and gives you the motivation to do it. But then if you're going into a man's field, you do need men encouraging you and helping you along too. And I had some wonderful men. A peer, a boyfriend, who introduced me to his flight instructor and encouraged me. And along with him, we went through all the training sort of together and supported each other, traded students and charter pilots together. And then one of my first instructors, Mr. Archibald, was fantastic. I joined his class in it was 727 systems training to become a flight engineer. And I was the only girl in the class. I was the only girl in a lot of these, the only girl and female instructor at the school, the only female student at the school for a long time. So you got used to just being me and the guys. They were very accommodating, or very encouraging and accepting of me. As if you could fly the airplane, and then the airplane certainly didn't care. So, but Mr. Archibald, when I walked into his class, I said, these guys have had 2 years leading up to this class. I think I don't know what's going on. And he said, well, come in an hour early each class and I'll bring you up to speed. And he did. This was a systems class about hydraulics, electrics, pneumatics, and jet engines. And he was a Eastern mechanic. So he would bring in the piece that I could look at and see how it worked, and then bring me up to speed on that system. And then that's what we would study. So he was just and made me feel like I could do this when I thought I couldn't. And then the other huge helper who had an impact on that career was Captain Hirschberg, who was the chief pilot at Seaboard World Airlines, was the cargo company that hired me to be the first female 747 pilot, and was as excited, actually initially, I think more excited about having me on board to do that than I had been told women couldn't do that. So he actually had to convince me to have the confidence in the airplane and in myself that he had, that allowed me to do that. So be forever grateful for that. He was an amazing man.
Yeah. So it sounds like really taking that impetus to find mentors, to find champions is a huge piece, because they lift you up when you sort of go through that roller coaster of, can I really do this? Especially when you're breaking new ground, essentially. I mean, how many female pilots are there now? I know there's a whole organization devoted to them, but
Well, sadly, we've not become, we're still only like 5 or 6%. I don't know the number, but percentage wise, when I got hired, I know in the overall the whole pilot union, I think there was like 60,000,
Mm,
and we were 20, so whatever that percentage is.
yeah.
And gradually, pretty quickly got to 5% of the overall, but it has stayed there. It's sort of stagnated for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's why part of the reason I wrote the books, and part of the reason I give presentations to answer the questions that women have. Often it is, that they don't think you can have a family, a home life, and have this career. And you can in fact, it's very accommodating for a home life. You do have to make some choices, and maybe not choose the big airplanes and the long routes if you want to be home every night, but you can do that. And I did it as a single mom and was home every night with my kids, and I think raised two fairly normal children who are functioning in society.
Yeah. No, and that's so great. I also wonder, because when you're breaking new ground, there are so many things. Just having the idea is sort of the first whisper, if you will, but then the actual making it happen can be so much more challenging. What were some of the barriers that you faced, some of the biggest challenges that you ran up against?
I think I'd start this by saying the main thing you need to face those barriers is you've got to really love what you're doing. It
Mm,
can't be to make a statement, to prove something, or for the attention. You just got to really love what you're doing so that all those barriers are worth it. They don't, they're inconveniences. They're not barriers. They're not something that's just gonna make you stop. Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge, and you're gonna have to get through it, and you're gonna have to figure out now what. But some of the barriers, well, yeah, initially there was just society's attitude of the women shouldn't be doing this. I
mhm,
mean, everything from religion, that it's not God's plan for a woman to be doing this, or men seeing it as a challenge of or even other women seeing it, that it's not a feminine way to be, and you're messing up the roles and
mhm.
makes them question their roles, I guess. I don't know. Then there's, sometimes there's legal barriers. I mean, we had to go through the EEOC. We had to have laws needed to change that even allowed us, and the ERA still hasn't passed. Women have got to get this together. um, and other barriers, some of them are funny. um, Passengers, just it's different. It's a change. So
Yeah.
it's something that they have to get used to. So the pilots had to get used to having a woman in their midst. The flight attendants had to get used to having a female pilot, and then at about the same time that when it became a pilot, men were becoming flight attendants, and that was a
Oh,
change for them to get.
wow.
Yeah, I'd have passengers get on and look up there and go, "Oh, isn't that cute? The captain's got his daughter up there dressed up just like him." And why is that one flight attendant keep going up to the cockpit? And do the pilots have their own flight attendants now? It was, and there were some, I had to stop taxiing out one time and talk to a passenger who wanted to get off, who thought he had been tricked
Oh,
into getting on a
wow.
plane with a female captain. So there were, but I always had the support of my flight crew and
Mhm.
the management. So I guess, yeah, those societal challenges, I suppose, some legal, some just uh, things you have to live with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know in the book you also talk about the history-breaking moment that you were an all-female crew in the cockpit, which is kind of amazing. So what allows you to stay like motivated and focused to get through difficult times to get to something like that? That's a really big deal.
Well, like I said, I loved it. I wasn't going to let somebody, and I don't know how young I was when it occurred to me that that's just somebody's opinion
Mm,
telling you that you can't do that, or you're too, whatever it is, fill in the blank to be able to do that or not be able to do that. It's not a fact. It's
mhm.
just their opinion. So even when the owner of that airline said to me and the female captain, I was a first officer, that we couldn't fly together because we needed a man in case anything went wrong.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
of course not. But that it's his airline. He can
Yeah.
say that. He can even make that rule. And he did. So for 3 months, until, as I say in the book, until the weather was such that only she and I could get to the airplane, and either the airplane was going to sit on the ground or he was going to let the two of us take 15 passengers to St. Louis. And finally he said, okay. And nothing bad happened. Passengers didn't refuse to get on the plane. So then we got to fly together. And that was the first all-female crew in history.
Wow.
So sometimes it's just an individual, sometimes it's all of society. But yeah, that was a barrier we had to, and a lot of times it was, even at TWA, there would be questions. You were assumed incompetent until you proved otherwise, instead of the
Wow.
other way around for the men. When they were hired, everybody assumed they knew what they were doing, unless they messed up and proved otherwise. We were constantly having to prove ourselves, but
Mm,
it just made you better at what you did. I think you just made sure you did know what you were doing and
yeah.
didn't mind proving it.
So what kind of advice would you give to someone aside from, you gotta love it, but to help bolster someone to follow their dreams, regardless of what field it is or what path it's taking them? Like, is there anything that you feel is helpful to empower people to be able to follow their dreams?
I think if you know, not just convince yourself, but you're positive that what you want and what you're doing is good for you. It's
Mhm.
helping you grow as a person, and it's helping the world. You
Mm,
really are using your gift to make the world a better place.
I love that.
Um, I mean, how can you say no to that? That's something you want to get up and do every
Mhm,
day.
mhm.
Um, and it's a win-win, we're all, and so if you're doing those two things, you're improving yourself and you're improving the world with the gift that you've been given and that you're using to give back. One of the themes in the book, I think, is just throughout. My grandma taught me early on, if you want to smile, go do for. Find somebody that needs something. I thought it was a verb. Go do for. Go help somebody. So it seemed like every time I did that, people would be very willing to do for me. And
Mhm,
so I would give and I would get. And it
mhm,
was constantly finding something in the world where I could use it, what I had or who I was, to give something. And then the world would give me something back amazing.
mhm.
So there's sort of a how to how to grow or how to get by giving, I guess, is so I would, yeah. So I guess I'm making it more complicated than what it is. You've been given these gifts. Figure out in your life who you are, um, how you can become better, and then make the world better along with it.
Yeah. Well, and I love, because I know you personally, that giving spirit is so strong and so deep. So even though you've retired from the airline industry, that led you down this path that created your nonprofit. So can we talk a little bit about that? First of all, I'd love to, if you would share how you came to be where that is, and then what motivated you to create it.
Um, yeah, I think it exemplifies exactly what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, it's our fault. So as I said, I was a single mom, raising two boys, being a pilot, wanting to find the one place I could fly and be home every night was to an airport called Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And it's a special entry airport. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world to fly into.
Mm.
But because of that, um, it was a fairly short day. I mean, I could drop the kids off at school. It's 2.5 hours from Houston to Tegucigalpa, 2.5 hours back, pick them up from school, have dinner and homework and do it again the next day. And I got good at it and enjoyed it. It was a challenge. But in doing that, then we always had missionaries on board who were bringing supplies in. I found out the hospitals and clinics that and the people in the schools that they were helping. So I started bringing in supplies too. And it opened up this whole world of beautiful people in this country that needed things. And I was in a unique position to be able to bring it to them. And I think when people see you giving that way, they're very willing to help you do that and help you as a person and in your challenge. So that's what we did for the whole time. And then we found out about the island off the north coast called Roatan that had even more needs. Had a clinic that couldn't open up without because they couldn't pay the electric bill. So we started bringing in supplies to be able to do that. Finally opened the clinic and then brought in supplies for that. Doing and I mean, it makes you feel like Santa Claus. Who wouldn't want to do this? You get to make people happy, bring them what they need. So then when I retired, however, I found out this was costing quite a bit more money than what I was thinking out of my personal pocket. So we started a nonprofit called Roatan Support Effort, ROSE. And it's now my self-assigned job, I guess. I've been made, I make very short trips down there, just 2 or 3 days to take down donations for the people, what they need, and then come back and get more and have a board that helps me and a large support system and have made some wonderful friends because of it. But yeah, and I get to use those travel privileges that I earned after a 37-year career of being a pilot. And I get to get on the plane and say hi to some of the people that I recognize and friends, get to go to the airport, which became a second home.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's working out well.
That's really fun. That's so wonderful. And I'll make sure to put the information down below so that if anybody wants to know more about Rose or if they're motivated to make a donation and help support the work you're doing, we can definitely do that.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So I have one really silly request before we close here. I love your background, the pictures and the planes and all of that. And up at the very top is a line of hats. If you could tip a little bit and just, could you tell us what each of those 6 hats is?
Well, there's actually 6
Oh
more
my.
there, but yeah, these 6, well, they're in order of my airlines. So there's Air Illinois, where I flew a Twin Otter, and then got the jet experience by flying that turboprop to be able to put in the application for TWA. So the next one's TWA. And the next one is that cargo 747 with Captain Hirschberg. So that's the Seaboard World, which merged with Flying Tigers, which were merged with FedEx, where I got furloughed and then went to People Express. And People Express was very unique. We didn't have hats. So we got baseball hats with so that it wasn't part of a uniform. There's a whole, that'd be a whole nother podcast or discussion about the uniqueness of People Express airline. And then People Express became Continental, and then Continental became United.
Wow.
Finally, by the very end, the United hat is finally a female pilot hat. It's, I think, made from similar to the Waves, the women in the Navy.
The Navy, yeah.
So
that's very cool. And what a beautiful picture, a career in 6 hats. That's so lovely.
Here, I'll show you this real quickly. These are the emblems that went on the
wow.
And the jackets.
That's really lovely. What a great memento that is.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for sharing with us. And I love your advice and support for someone who wants to follow their dreams. So don't let the world tell you no. Love what you're doing. Find role models and mentors who can support you, and just believe in doing in doing
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
world to help. That's really wonderful advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And as always, it was really great to see you.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah, and for everyone who's watching, please check out the notes down below under this video. I will have links to Lynn's books. I will have a link to Rose if you want to know more about that. Of course, I will have a little bit of her enormous Wikipedia bio, but just a tiny bit there. And so I encourage you
May I
to,
say one thing?
yes, of
I
course.
do give, I'm a public speaker. I give presentations to groups who would be interested in hearing similar, that like we just talked about, but more in depth and more of this and many of the funny stories that went along in this career. And so I'm available to be for hire as a speaker.
Yeah, so I'll put that link down below as well so
Thank
that
you.
you can contact Lynn. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I encourage you to remember it is never too late to follow your dreams, and to also remember, as always, in all you do, to make today a healthy day. Welcome, friends. In today's One Small Action Step, we are talking with Captain Lynn Rippelmeyer, and she is going to share her one small action step to get you started on unlocking your dreams. Lynn, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's a little bit of a two-step, one step. First thing
I love
is
that.
get it clear enough in your head, write it down,
Yeah.
and then be aware, just observe, because something is going to come in your path that you're going to have to say okay to, that's going to allow you that first step. And it might be a little scary. Just don't say, well, not now. Just say yes. Say yes to when the world is asking you for something. And then when it gives that gift back, say yes and take it. But it does help to write it down so you've got clear in your head what you're looking for to happen. And it'll happen.
I love that.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you so much for sharing. That is wonderful. Thanks for joining us, folks. And I encourage you, write down your dreams, like Lynn said, and then say yes to the possibility. Take care, folks. Bye.